I was going to make a Jamari Taylor video, but I was so impressed with the way that Chandler Morris was throwing the football that I was like, I have to take a deeper look at him. I watched Virginia and NC State live. I watched Virginia, Florida State live. Two of Chandler Morris's, not his best performances. So I had a mixed opinion on him coming into this. And then I watched the Stanford game, and I still have mixed opinions. He played so well against Stanford. So we're going to take a look at some things that Chandler Morris does well right now, and we're going to take a look at some things that I think he's going to have to improve on if he wants to elevate his draft status. So because we're talking about him as a draft prospect, not just a college football player, there's going to be some negative things thrown in there. I just want to preface this video with I think Chandler Morris is a great college football quarterback. I think this is a guy that does have the potential to get drafted, pretty early if he cleans up on some things. But as always, you guys let me know what you think about him. I make these videos to hear other people's opinions. But, just talking about what I think Chandler Morris, man, this dude has a cannon, This was the clip that I watched. This is like the first drive, and I was trying to make Jamari Taylor videos, get clips of him, and then I don't even think Taylor's in on this play, and I saw Chandler Morris just whip this from the opposite hash to the opposite numbers. Some serious arm strength that Chandler Morris has. We're going to see that throughout this video. Not only the decision making, I think he goes through his progressions pretty well as well, and not only to make those decisions, but then he has the arm strength to execute those decisions. Look how fast he just looks off from the right side, knows where this 10-yard, 15-yard hitch is to his left, and he just throws this ball on the money. So we're going to see him do a lot of this stuff where he flies through his progressions pretty well, and then every now and then he'll just not make the best decision. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Another thing that I have a major problem with Chandler Morris right now is the way that he manipulates the pocket. This is one of the ones that he does pretty well here. We don't see this all the time with Chandler Morris throughout this entire video, but this is a great job of not stepping up here. He sees this Louisville defender kind of flash his shoulder pad to the inside. Does a really good job bouncing this to the outside. I kind of want to see him step up a bit more, but we'll see. That was a good job on that one. Now, Chandler Morris as an athlete, going to be interesting to see what he runs in the 40-yard dash. I think he's certainly capable, and I'm going to even say he's a bit more than capable. Not only a capable athlete, but you kind of have to account for him because on these naked bootlegs, on these read options, he is a threat to run the ball. I definitely think that about him. Here's another one. NC State still. Looks off to the left, knows where this crosser is over the middle, and then he has the arm strength to deliver before that linebacker can react to his eyes. So the arm strength, the processing when it's there, that's really good. That's what's going to make Chandler Morris an interesting prospect going forward. Now, we're going to see a lot more of this decision making. I watched this clip a couple times, and I made sure I was aware of the down and the distance because this is 1st and 10, and pretty much the situation is if Virginia wins. If Virginia scores a touchdown on this drive, they win the football game against NC State, And he ends up throwing an interception. Then I was like, if this is 4th and 2, I kind of understand if it was 4th and goal or whatever. But, 1st and 10, I really want to defend this. I just don't think this is ever open. I don't think this is a throw that he should ever make. But, this is to lose the game. So this is one of the worst ones that we'll see on this. But now Stanford, he played a hell of a game. The arm strength that he has, the way that he pushes the ball down the field, the anticipation that he throws with. There's certainly a lot to like with Chandler Morris. The reason I'm making this video is because of the arm strength, because I really do think this dude has a cannon, and we're going to even see some not only when he has a clean pocket, when he can kind of stand in and deliver, but even when he's on the roll, when he's rolling out, when he's breaking the pocket, the way that he can throw without a clean base, is very impressive. So I think as an arm talent, that's really what you like about Chandler Morris. And this is a lot of things that we're going to see also, just this pocket presence stuff. I just hate ever turning your back to the defender that is trying to tackle you here, And he does it a couple times, and we're going to see it throughout this entire video. But I'd rather, I understand I'm not the one that has a 400-pound, 300-pound Stanford lineman bearing down at me, but this just seems like an inefficient way to kind of escape this pressure. I think if he would have just kind of stepped up to his left here, right down the middle, I think it parts. Ends up throwing a completion. I'll give him credit for that. Some of the off-script stuff, finding receivers downfield. He does a good job of that, but so every now and then the pocket presence. But we saw this one against NC State, right? Really quick through his progressions. Can not only make the decision, but he has the arm strength to execute it downfield, 20-yard gain. And that ball was out pretty fast as well. Now, this is really high-level stuff. This is what I was talking about. We're seeing good pocket awareness here. Let's see this next one. Does a good job getting out of the pocket and then has not only that arm strength, but this is pure upper body here. He does not have a base, and he delivers a beautiful ball downfield for a touchdown. So that's some of the stuff that I do like, and then we're going to see the arm strength here. I apologize for the weird video angle, but this is another one. 30 yards downfield. This is a beautiful ball outside. Here it is again, on the rollout, has that arm action. We're going to see him do something similar against Florida State, but not going to work in the next game. Yeah, Florida State game, really rough. Finished with 3 interceptions, and a lot of the interceptions that I see with Chandler Morris, they aren't necessarily that he doesn't know what he's looking at. I just think that he trusts his arm too much, and sometimes that's a good thing, but I think against Florida State, against Stanford, when he trusted his arm, we saw it go well. Against Florida State, didn't really do the same thing. And this first clip here is another pocket presence thing. You've got to feel this guy bear it down, Just reacts to this too late. This is probably a pass protection issue. Somebody missed an assignment, but at the same time, just have to anticipate that a little bit. This is a good job of him stepping up. We saw it against... We're going to see it again later, or we saw it against Stanford. One of the clips we already watched, we saw him not step up. We saw him kind of bail, and he got kind of lucky, I think, to find somebody down. This is great. Great job of him feeling the pressure. Great job of him stepping up. Keeps his eyes downfield as long as he can. Sees the rushing lane open up, and then he has the athleticism to kind of take advantage of that. So we see the flashes of the pocket presence stuff. I just think that we kind of need to see it a bit more consistently if we're going to talk about Chandler Morris being like a day 2 draft guy. And then we're going to see more of this also. Just this decision-making when the play breaks down. It's just trusting his arm too much. I really don't know what he's looking at here. There's Florida State defenders all over where he's looking. This is one you just got to either throw it out or, try to make a rushing move. Or I really can't believe Virginia won this football game, when Chandler Morris made, we're going to see like 3 unforced interceptions throughout this game, but that was the first one. This is the second one, This one's a little less bad than that last one we just watched. But it's still, to me, it's just him trusting his arm too much. It's not necessarily that he's getting flustered by what he's looking at or he doesn't know what he's looking at. I just think, I think even if you had a bazooka and you had a football, if you were able to shoot a football out of a bazooka, I'm not sure that could make this throw here. Like I said, this dude has a great arm, going to have one of the best arms in this upcoming draft, I think. And even he can't make this throw. I just think he has to know to not throw that one. Yeah, this one, another completion to the right, the situation, 2nd and 2. He completes this to Jamari Taylor, number 3, the running back, flaring out. But again, 2nd and 2, I think we kind of have to step up and just take this first down to his left right here. I like him not throwing to number 1, this receiver that we're seeing open, because he's going to do it later and it's going to get jumped and should have been a pick 6. But I don't know. It's a lot of green grass to his left. I just feel like he could have stepped up and ran for a first down. He threw a completion. Of course I'm nitpicking, but we have to, right? If we're going to talk about these guys being in the NFL, game moves so fast. This one goes for a completion, but, I think he kind of got lucky. This is a great play by number 19 also, so I'm not going to really go crazy on Chandler Morris here. Jerry Wilson's going to be in the NFL next year, but, if we're going to talk about Chandler Morris being in the NFL, he's going to have these guys all over the defense. I don't know. This looked open. He does a good, again, highlighting the positives. He does a good job looking off to the right. I don't have it on the screen right now, but nothing. Florida State was completely locked down to his right, and he diagnosed that in like a half second, and he looks to his left, and you can't only look at, is it open now, but is it going to be open when the ball gets there? And, Jerry Wilson, just very explosive football player, does a great job breaking on it. I think he got lucky, this going for a first down, but we're all about the process on this channel, right? Not necessarily just the results. I think that's going to get intercepted most times. But here it is again. We've seen a lot of these clips, just how fast he looks off the progression to the left, knows exactly where that 10-yard hitch is to his right, and has the processing to make the decision, the arm strength to execute. I think that's why we're going to be talking about Chandler Morris having a chance in this upcoming draft. Then the athleticism again, certainly good enough. It's another one, this decision making when it's not there sometimes it's just not the best for Chandler Morris, I think. This is another one probably should have been intercepted. He had 3 picks in this game. I think he could have just as easily had 5. Anyways, that was Chandler Morris this season. Just giving my final thoughts on him. I think this is a dude that's flourish to get drafted. If he was the same exact player going into April if he keeps showing the same things on tape, I think this is a guy that goes in the 6th round. I really do think he has a chance to go in the 3rd round. I don't know if we're going to be talking about him as a 1st rounder or as a 2nd rounder, but I think if he cleans up a lot of those decision-making things, we can live with the pocket stuff just because we see a lot of upside with it, right? We saw him do it well. We saw him step up in the pocket throughout, so he can definitely do that. I think if he cleans up a lot of these off-script decision-making things, we're going to be talking about Chandler Morris as a pretty fun draft prospect, just because of the arm strength, and I do think he has a pretty good command of the Virginia offense. But, those are my thoughts right now on him. This is me on we-draft.com. If you want to go check out other players or if you want to leave your own evaluations, please check that out. Also, let me know, either on the website or on the comments. I read everything. I'm curious to hear what other people think about him. I appreciate you guys for watching.